do people stop thinking that typing outrageous complaints on Facebook is a substitute for real social action and real social activism?
Oh, it's utterly rampant. I mean, you see it. Social media has become a substitute for people's social lives. I mean, they spend vast amounts of time, and I'm full disclosure here. You know, a lot of it I do for the show, a lot of it I do on my own. You know, I've tried to mitigate my exposure to, especially Facebook, over the last couple of years, because I think it's grown into something that it's not good for me to be constantly connected to, you know?
Yeah, but a lot of your efforts and a lot of our efforts on the show are using Facebook as a way of directing people to direct action.
We're using it as a weapon.
Right. So we want people to get inspiration, maybe a few instructions, maybe a few tips, and maybe a way to give feedback to us. But we're asking and we're demanding people move beyond their keyboard, move beyond their mutual admiration society that is their circle of friends on social media.
Of likes.
And that's the only way it's going to hit critical mass. I mean, that's the traditional media isn't necessarily on our side. They do a bad job. And, you know, the civic involvement, the civic engagement isn't there. And that's, I think, part of the solution is long-term to make it easier for people to run for office, to make it easier using technology, to make people think about showing up at their town hall and kind of the old cliche of thinking globally and acting locally.
Well, and I can give you a perfect example of that. So in the city of Woonsocket, which is a city of now 41,000 and change people, you know, at its height it was about 65,000. This is a city that moved away from ward-based elections for city council, where, you know, you would have different wards all over the city and people would run in those wards for city council, and sometimes have a couple of at-large seats on the council, you know, people that ran citywide. We moved to an entirely 7-person-based citywide election. So basically, you know, if you're running for city council, you have to go out and canvass as many people in the city as somebody who's running for mayor. And what it does is, because we have a, you know, top 7, you know, the top 7 people in a field of however many make it onto the city council, there's never actually a referendum on leadership, because you're not actually running against anybody. You're running for one of the top 7 spots, whatever that may be.
And as people kind of pick their top 5 or pick their top 7, what percentage of those people actually do you think know anything about those candidates?
Or they might have 2 of them that they
and
know
then they just say
something about.
Right. How many
this
times
guy
do
has a
people
cool
just vote
name and
for 1 or 2 people to give an artificial advantage to that?
Well, I'll tell you this from a behind-the-scenes aspect on political campaigns. You know, for a local election like that, for a city council at-large election, what you do is you ask your supporters for the bullet, which means you vote for one candidate and no others, because every vote for those 6 other people is actually a vote against you from being in the top,
percentage-wise,
7.
I like to throw a whole new ruining in there, was that if I don't know the candidates or I'm not particularly interested in the candidates, I'll write in Pat Ford or I'll write in a Dan Padandi and connect the line for them.
I can't tell you how many times I've written my own name on that write-in line. Or sometimes I check off the write-in and just write pass.
Uncontested votes?
I actually write in my 19-year-old daughter.
Go outside.
She's smarter than I am, so what are you going to do? And soon I'll be able to write in my 17-year-old when she's 18, because she's smarter than I am, too. A fact that both of them constantly remind me of on a routine basis.
Okay, so I think we hope we're coming up on a band break here, because we want to talk to Ann for a little bit.
Yeah, we should. Looks like they're switching over sets now.
We got another one right here.
You can take that. You probably want to get a little closer to those guys so you can hear what they're saying. We're going to get in a kumbaya style huddle.
Are we sharing? Is that what's going on? Pat's going to take a nap in the men's room. He needs a power nap.
I think Pat just had a stroke.
God, let's all, Tony, you know as well as I do that Pat works harder and longer and more ridiculously than most other people that we know. I mean,
he's up way past his bedtime.
Oh God, yeah. The only thing that actually keeps him awake after 10 p.m. is if he's driving from some godforsaken northern New York.
And Viagra.
Well, no, I mean that keeps him from rolling over in bed. It doesn't keep him awake. Although with his gut, I don't know if that would make a difference.
He is Irish.
Oh, he's not even here. I'm shitting on the guy. That's terrible. I'm sorry, Pat. So, moving into a break here in the music, we want to talk to Ann Armstrong, former gubernatorial candidate here in the state of Rhode Island.
Hello.
Certainly an advocate for the legalization of, how we say, cannabis in our circles. I don't want to say doobage or Mary Jane or one of those other words that the kids say.
Well, it really doesn't matter. You could use whatever word you want, but you should know that the word marijuana was introduced into the English language by William Randolph Hearst in his attempt to demonize the plant and create a whole reefer madness.
Well, yeah, because he printed newspapers and he wanted to print them on tree pulp rather than hemp paper.
Whatever the reason was, but
actually, wasn't his sister-in-law's family had the tree business, the paper business, or something like that? There was some kind of incestuous.
I don't know about all that.
DuPont
but
patented nylon, a competitor for hemp fiber. And they did so with a melon loan. And Andrew Mellon's nephew was Harry Anslinger, the first drug czar who banned cannabis first in the U.S. and then globally at the UN level.
Yeah.
But
if folks don't know this, and I don't want to, we don't want to get into a history lesson of cannabis prohibition here. We're trying to touch on the issues that we're talking about in Rhode Island here. Take a few minutes, folks. Like a half an hour someday, and just get on the internet and learn about the history of prohibition of marijuana in this country, because drugs in this country are not prohibited for the reasons that you think they are. There are market forces at work. There are big moneyed interests at work. There are pharmaceutical companies at work certainly today. So don't believe the hype when somebody tells you, oh, this is the gateway drug that leads to people being addicted to heroin. It's just not that. And frankly, if you go to work today and you think that nobody around you in your next cubicle or in the next office or
your doctor or your nurse,
if you think oh, they don't smoke pot, you're wrong. You're wrong. You know more people that smoke dope than you think you know. And you would never guess, because you work next to them. They serve you food. So many people
co-host radio shows with you.
That's right. They waste their time on 3.5-hour podcasts. No, this is not a waste of time. It's a labor of love, folks. So here we go. We have Ann Armstrong, former gubernatorial candidate, cannabis advocate, lover, proponent. You name it. One question I want to ask Ann. We're just over 100 days into Gina Raimondo's administration here in the state. Tell us what the Ann Armstrong Rhode Island would look like 100 days into your administration.
that is a very good question. Well, I think the state would have changed its name to Rhode Island.
Okay. Even though we'd be growing more stuff, you would get rid of the plantations, right?
I think I definitely would change the name to Cannabis Plantations.
Okay.
But all kidding aside, I've seen a lot of troubling things emerge. It seems like voter participation in the process of government has been completely eliminated. I remember back in the day when I used to be politically active before, you could call up your legislators. You could go look and find out their phone numbers and call them up and they talk to you. Now, try and get in touch with even a legislator from your own town, they're really not available.
Yeah, I found that disturbing. I actually went to the state's website this week, and really all I could find was people's email addresses. And, I saw that, and I said to myself, God, I know how many emails I ignore.
I know.
So,
and it seems like
it's really easy to ignore an email. A written letter, a phone call, that's one thing. But,
but it seems like it's getting easier and easier for government to be done at us instead of for us or with us. And we see a lot of things that the voters are very alarmed about, like this roadmap Rhode Island that nobody knew where that's coming from out of the blue. And a lot of insider deals, and it seems like I would have thought our legislators would have learned after the former speaker pled guilty to bribery charges not to come up with more bills that just create more opportunities for bribes. But it doesn't seem like they've learned their lesson, and they're just going along business as usual.
So I mean,
what would it be like if I were governor?
Right.
Well, given that the governor's
we're talking here about transparency. We're talking about accessibility.
There's one
all
thing
the
that
things that really we've lacked
in
our government
defense,
in this state,
I want to say one
for the
thing.
last 50 years.
One thing, the governor's power in the state of Rhode Island is so severely limited constitutionally that they are very little more than a figurehead.
Sure.
The governor can do nothing but try and persuade, and then possibly veto. But if she vetoes too much, she's going to lose the support of the legislators, and they have all the power in the state. Really, all the power in Rhode Island is concentrated in the hands of the General Assembly. And they have absolutely no mechanism to police them, and they refuse to police themselves. And I think, given that I have a big mouth and I like to dig up crap on people and yell about it, I think that...
Wait, there was a certain person, was it Carnivale this week?
Well, yeah, I only found this out because he's sponsoring a bill that's trying to take away all the hardworking caregivers in favor of for-profit model to take cannabis away from the most sick people who need it. And in digging him up, I just looked him up on Google. The first thing that pops up is a Wikipedia article that he was indicted for rape.
I'm going to use the
woman died.
The legally, non-offensive term here. He's an alleged rapist and domestic abuser.
That's correct. But there was enough evidence to bring down an indictment from a grand jury, which legally means there was a preponderance of evidence. In a civil suit, he would have lost.
I'm not going to argue with that.
That's just legally what it means when you're indicted.
Anybody who holds public office is alleged is enough for you should have the common decency at that point
to resign,
to step aside and resign.
Especially when the victim dies right
and
before.
I've said this over and over again. The standard has to change unless we hold those elected officials to a higher standard than your average Joe six-pack everyday workaday. Like, my neighbor, his wife said he beat him. Okay, well, let him go to court and let him figure it out there and let him be convicted before I pass judgment on this guy.
Well, the thing is,
but I think when you serve the public in any capacity, that allegation,
that's right,
puts a cloud over you that you really should never be able to come back from.
I honestly think, though, that once that poor woman died, a young, healthy woman died of pulmonary embolism right after the indictment came out, I think people became afraid to say anything.
And there's a lot of folks that... they're willing to, and I don't know what it is about this state of Rhode Island. How does a guy like Buddy Cianci mount of an almost successful mayoral campaign?
Well, wait a minute.
In the
Water
city of
Fire
Providence?
is awesome, and Water Place Park is beautiful. So I still love Buddy, even if he is a crook.
But I mean, in this case, we're not talking about allegations. We're talking about conviction.
That's true. I know
Prison
that.
time.
And yet
But you know what?
Our collective memories are so
paid his
short. And
price.
I